Today we're going to be talking about the police cam footage of Kevin Franke where he was being interrogated by the police. I'm actually going to be reacting to this video and I have seen part of it, but I want to go ahead and react to all of it with you because I don't remember everything that was in it, but I know that there were some points that I wanted to make. And I believe there is also a second one, so I'll see how much time we have left in today's video after, and we may go into the second one. So I'm expecting this video to be very long because we're going to be reacting to the full video. If you have not been on my channel before, I've kind of had my little magnifying glass on Kevin Franke for a while because I feel like there isn't enough spotlight on him. We all know what Ruby Franke did, what Jodi did, but I feel like Kevin has kind of got off scot-free, and there are a lot of red flags with him, and I saw some of them in this body cam footage. My last video, I went over the jail calls between him and Ruby, and at the time that I went over those with you all, I had not seen this footage, and this just further drives it in for me that this man cannot be trusted. We're going to be reacting to this and talking about it, but if you would like to see my other videos that I've done on Kevin Franke specifically, I will link them down below, and I'm going to see how much time I have today to go over some other topics surrounding the Franke situation. So you may see me later on today in another video talking about Ruby and Jodi. I've also found some 8-passenger clips that are really disturbing, so you may see me again in another video, but there is so much to talk about, so expect a lot on this to come out in the near future. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this because this video is going to be really long, and if you haven't seen this yet, there are some very disturbing things in this police cam footage, but let's go ahead and watch it.
Miranda rights before we start. We're just kind of ask you a few questions about your involvement. Okay, so first, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law. Okay, you have the right to an attorney or to have him or her present while questioning. If you cannot afford to hire one, one will be hired to represent you. If you decide to answer questions, you can stop at any time. Okay? Do you understand your rights?
I do.
Okay. Do you wish to speak to me now?
Well, I want to pick up my kids.
How about this? We're going to ask you some questions, and if you don't want to answer them, you just say, hey man, I'm not going to answer that.
Sure.
And we
Just say, hey, I'm not going to talk, that's not beneficial to you, and then we're done, you're nowhere, and we're nowhere, and
Sure.
you understand that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just for starters, what was your full name?
Kevin William Franke.
I can't remember.
Some of them are teenagers, 2 adults. Yeah.
So are they all living with you, or
No, I haven't seen them for over a year.
any of them?
No, none of them.
For a year.
Over a year.
Okay.
I've been in a separation
From who?
from my wife and family.
What's your wife's name?
Ruby Franke.
When's the last time you saw Ruby?
The last time I saw her
Yeah.
was the 18th of this month. We met she requested me to sign over vehicles, or the titles to the vehicles. The vehicle that she drives were all in my name.
When's the last time you physically saw
One thing that I find to be disgusting on every single level that you can imagine is that, okay, so this was filmed on August 8th, okay, and he said, what was it, the 18th was the last time that he had seen Ruby of that month, but hadn't seen his kids in over a year. The fact that the amount of times where I've seen him sit here and just act like this is justifiable, that because you were in a separation and your wife said don't see your kids, that you just bear no responsibility at all. This is just alleged in my opinion, but I don't know how I feel about him not knowing anything after everything that I've seen. I thought in the beginning that Kevin didn't know the extent, but after seeing him, which you'll see in this video as we continue, not ask about his kids' well-being at all. That comes off like somebody who already knows. Also, he gets Ruby her lawyer. He finds her lawyer for her. Go watch my other video over the jail calls if you haven't seen it. Red flags galore in that video. Sitting here saying he hasn't seen his kids for over a year, that just to me sounds like, let me know if you disagree with me or if you agree with what I'm saying, but to me it sounds like someone who's trying to convince these people I didn't know the condition my children were in because I haven't seen them. Because if you saw her on the 18th of this month that you filmed this, either you were a completely, neglectful parent, which is very possible, or you were just trying to cover your own tracks, which we've seen numerous times him trying to do, allegedly.
The day that I moved out, July 24th, 2022.
24th of 2022.
Or July 25th, July 25th.
So it's my understanding that at least home here in Kayenta and Ivans, have you been to that home?
No.
You've not been to that home?
No, I don't know. I don't know what's anything that's been going on.
Like, this is good, man. Like, I would love to be able to help you out with this, and like, I'm seeing the light of being this at home because I'm unaware of your involvement in what's really going on. So for you to say that you're unaware of the status of your kids kind of makes, I know that sounds kind of crummy to you, but it sounds kind of good to me. Like, who lives in that home with your, is it ex-wife? Is it currently a separated wife? Like, who lives in that home with your children?
To be honest, I don't know. I know that she's there with 4 of the children, and our 2 older children have moved out.
They're not at your home in Springville? And I'm not trying to trip you up. I can see you're hesitant to talk to me. I understand that.
Well, where I live, no,
Yeah.
I haven't seen them for over a year.
Okay. That's tough. I can only imagine how that feels, man. I got kids. And to not have seen them for that long, that would tear a little piece of my heart out.
I feel like we're not even watching a human being that's alive right now. Like that guy who's talking to him, he's trying to get some humanity out of him in this, and he's giving nothing. He's giving nothing to him at all. He's just staring at them like, no, this hasn't been tough on me at all. I feel nothing over this. Because I hear what this guy's saying, because if I hadn't seen my kids in over a year, I would be giving more than what Kevin is right here. But he's just kind of staring at him like, hello. He looks just as brainwashed as Ruby does. Nobody can convince me of anything else. He looks just as brainwashed and delusional. Just that blank stare.
Of age to drive. Does she drive?
I don't know.
Okay.
Like I said, I know nothing that's going on in their lives or anything going on.
How did you find out that you needed to come here to 55 North Main Street?
I received a message that I needed to come pick up my kids from the police department in Highlands.
And who was that message from?
Well, I prefer not to say right now.
His wife, Ruby.
It would just help us a lot.
I'll try to figure out who reached out to you because it makes sense that would happen. I'm just not aware of anyone who did that from her department.
He doesn't want to say anything because he wants to protect her.
And I'm not comfortable saying right now who reached out to me.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Doesn't want to get her in trouble.
you haven't seen any of your kids in over a year, you said?
That's correct.
And then, what was the last time you saw her? How old is she now?
15.
She's 16. Okay. And then when all the kids left, Ruby took all of them?
Yeah, she stayed in the house and I moved out.
Okay. And did you ever try to reach out to the kids, drop by the home, or
No.
was
I
there?
honored the no separation boundary that we agreed to.
So, what
Or
was
no
your separation?
contact boundary, excuse me.
Did you have a no contact order in place?
Or, no, this was between my wife and I.
So, what did Ruby ask of you when you separated?
What did she ask of me?
Did she ask you not to contact the kids?
Ruby invited me to leave the home while I thought about the choices that I've made in my life and the way that I've treated her.
Okay.
And so I left.
And how long had you and Ruby been married?
I love that wording. Ruby invited me to leave the house. Who says that?
Married in 2000.
So about 22 years?
When we separated, we were going on 22 years. Yes.
Okay. And during your marriage, how was disciplining your kids? How would you discipline your kids?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
Of
that's
course.
fine. Yeah.
Have you been since separated or since they lived here in the city of Ivins? Have you communicated with your wife regarding like disciplining with your kids or their care or their physical well-being?
Of course not. Of course he's going to say
Is she
no.
doing this on her own and just telling you how your kids are?
She's not telling me anything about the kids.
Who's this female Jodi that your wife was with? Do you know a female named Jodi?
She is a therapist and a life coach, I know. And she's,
Do you respect her?
do I respect her? Yeah, I think she's a very honest, truthful person, yes.
Okay. You place
Some of the things, like the clips that I've seen of the second interview where he's talking about stuff that he knew about her, I find it very shocking that he would say he trusted her and she was a very trustworthy person. We'll get into that though.
value on Jodi.
I don't know what that means.
Like, do you value what she says and how she treats? Is your wife a client of hers? Is your wife a partner of hers? Is your wife a roommate with her? Your kids are living in her house is what I'm trying to say.
I'm not aware of that, but I know that they've been in business for the last year filming.
Who's they?
Ruby and Jodi. They
Ruby
film
and Jodi's been in business.
podcasts, and so every week a podcast goes up and I listen to it.
Listens to it. Nobody can tell me that this man was not still a part of Connections and what Ruby and Jodi were doing. He had communication with her, allegedly, and he was listening to their podcast that would go up. There are some very disturbing teachings in this podcast that Jodi and Ruby would do together, and he would listen to it. He was still a part of this.
Connections with an X.
Like CON.
CONNEXIONS. Yeah.
And then, like, do you support them in that role and doing that and having?
Do I support them in the business?
Yeah, like, do you support them and think that what they're doing is a good thing, or
Yeah, I support their business efforts. I think it's a good thing.
are you involved with their business efforts, or
No.
so just Ruby and Jodi? No
In
Kevin.
the business?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And were you involved in the 8 passengers account with your family?
Yes. I was in the videos, if that's what you mean.
I briefly learned about this 2 hours ago.
So did Ruby more so do the videos for the family? And how long did you guys do that for?
She started the channel in 2015, and as far as I'm aware, from the time I left, the last video she uploaded was towards the end of 2021.
Okay.
And I'm not aware of anything she's done since our separation. I don't visit 8 passengers anymore.
Chapter of your life.
I'm not aware of anything she's done since then, but you just said you listen to her podcast every single time it goes up.
Just through text, phone call?
Through text, and if there's anything considered an emergency, we agreed that we would communicate through a phone call.
Okay. And do you know her phone number off the top of your head?
The top of my head, no.
Okay. No worries. So, how often would you guys communicate while she was down here?
Well, I don't know how often or long she was down here. We've communicated 4 times in 2023 since January.
So are you aware of how she disciplines the kids or how she handles
No,
the kids with behavioral issues or anything like that?
no,
So you're unaware of how she does that?
yes,
Okay. Are you aware of the physical condition of your children?
no. No, I've chosen to trust my wife with the children. That was part of the agreement of our separation.
Do you know why he's not aware of the physical condition of his children at this point? Because he hasn't asked anything about them. Not one question. Nothing. He hasn't asked what's going on. Are my kids okay? Where are my kids? Why can't I see them? What happened? No questions. None. Either he doesn't care or he knew something. Because this is not a normal way that a good father responds. A good father doesn't neglect to see his kids for over a year. And a good father does not show up in an environment like this and not say, what is going on here? Why am I being interrogated right now? Where are my kids? Are they okay? This is not a normal response. Nothing about this is normal.
Allow her to physically provide for the needs of the child. You're just removed from that. I mean, you pay support. I know this is personal questions, but
No, yes, my job is to financially provide for
I'm just trying to figure out like how much of a role do you play in the caretaking of specifically of those 2 kids?
I pay the bills.
Okay.
With my job, I provide the money, goes into a shared bank account, and that's my only involvement.
Okay. There's a whole bunch of things I want to talk to you about, but I still can't get over the fact that someone notified you to come here to pick up your kids. My guess is, was that Jodi?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
All I'll say is
Well,
someone
you said you
notified
trusted her. You said that you think that she's not necessarily. I asked you if you placed value on her, but you obviously.
she is an honest. I know her to be an honest and a trustworthy individual, and so yeah, I trust her. And I received a communication that and so I left immediately from my job and drove down here. That's all I know. I've come to pick up my kids and to take them home with me.
And ask no questions.
Yeah, is there custodial paperwork that says that you're like a?
It's so weird to me.
Custodial paperwork denying you of rights, correct?
There's no custodial paperwork at all.
Period. So the kids are yours.
They are mine.
Okay.
Yes. This wasn't just a verbal agreement between my wife and I when we separated last year.
What questions do you have?
Oh, I want to know what's going on and why I was asked to come down and pick up my 2 kids.
14 minutes in.
Well,
And
we
a
don't-
lot of that kind of hinges on who asked you, because if we had been the one, like, I'm not going to say you fit, but I'm confident a cop didn't call you because we wouldn't have wanted you down here at this point in our investigation. So, having said that, I think it's time we be honest with you, right?
Sure. No, and I didn't lie.
You're
Someone contacted me, but I don't want to
You said
say
someone
without
from your office, but okay.
He wants to protect Ruby in this. Okay? He wants to protect her. He cares more about protecting her in this than he does about what's going on with his children, and it is glaringly obvious.
well, I don't recall saying someone from my office.
Our office.
No.
someone, yeah, so we don't know who called you. So if we knew who called you, then we could help you,
It would make more sense.
but
Well, I don't know the legal ramifications of implicating individuals who contacted me, and so without a lawyer here, I don't want to answer that question.
that's okay.
I
But
appreciate
you want to know specifics of the case, which we can't share right now because it's under investigation. So
I see.
Yeah, so we would like to ask questions about where you found out, but we'll respect that if you don't want to share that information. But I am curious, when you guys had the previous 8 Passengers YouTube channel, you guys got a lot of heat for neglect and child abuse. A lot of people commented those things on there. Why were they commenting those things?
That's a good question. We had a son who was acting out in very selfish behavior. And none of this is strange or odd. You could get on YouTube and find out all sorts of stuff on this.
It's like a double-edged sword.
Whereas the question is, what do you believe, right? There was even an article written in Newsweek magazine in 2020 on it, or was it Newsweek? No, Business Insider, where we were interviewing him, and we were pretty straightforward, and we talked about it, and we shared our piece in that. Basically, it boils down to he was being very cruel and mean to his siblings.
I wonder where he learned that from. He was being cruel and mean and acting out. I wonder why.
His siblings that he shared a room with, and so we removed him from the room. And we said, you can sleep anywhere you want. Sleep on the couch, sleep on the pull-out bed, sleep on the floor for all we care, but you're not sleeping in that room with your brother. He chose to sleep on a beanbag. So 9 months later, he had made a lot of changes in his life. And he was ready to, and we had moved by that time. And so we had a new house, and he was ready to move into his own bedroom. Made a video about it. And in the video, he mentioned something to the effect of, I've been sleeping for 9 months on a beanbag. And that is what all the uproar was about.
What did you guys?
It was just the beanbag. All the uproar was about the beanbag that he chose to sleep on, not about starving your children, because I do recall that was all over it too. Okay? And it wasn't just him on a beanbag. Delusional people.
To help, like with his behavioral issues, is that something you and Ruby talked about together? And then did you? Helping you discover yourself and fix behavioral issues and things like that. Is that something you and Ruby sought out to help correct, like some of the things?
Yes, and
Okay.
and I supported it, and so together we held boundaries for our son to support his choosing honest and responsible choices. And when he chose honest and responsible choices consistently is when he began to get his privileges back. And that was
Great parenting, right?
well, that was the uproar, right?
Yeah.
And
That
so,
was not the uproar. That was not it.
But yes,
That was part of it.
through 2000.
My God, this man is just trying. He sounds like the male version of Ruby. Somebody disagree with me in the comments, because I know nobody's going to. Like, when he's talking, he sounds just like her. The way he's talking about the discipline and the wording that he chooses to use, that look in his eyes that Ruby has. It's like the same thing. I don't see a difference between him and her.
Contact with him because I'm honoring the no contact separation boundary with that I agreed to with my wife. But I understand that he's 18, living on his own somewhere in Provo.
I think what they're asking here, because a lot of this was redacted and you can't hear it, I think what they were asking was, why are you not talking to him? Because the son that he's referring to that was sleeping on the beanbag, they're probably asking, why aren't you in communication with him? Because he is over the age of 18. So you can't just say, I'm honoring, what me and my wife, decided about me not, seeing my kids at all for over a year, when he is a legal adult who no longer lives with his mom, but he also wasn't communicating with his adult children either. They honestly, probably his oldest children probably didn't want anything to do with him, after everything that they did. Forget, he was going to sue his daughter for going into their home and getting laptops and stuff like that. He was going to take legal action against his own daughter. They probably don't want anything to do with this man, and I don't blame him.
And working and supporting himself.
What other kids went down to visit Jodi?
What other kids?
Yeah, did you send any of the other kids down to spend time with Jodi?
We didn't send down to spend time with Jodi. They would meet on Zoom.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, we were in spring stuff. Well, even in 2019, she would meet with them.
So when did Ruby and Jodi, to your knowledge, decide to collaborate, come together, and mesh lives? Because that's what's happened.
Well, they decided to start a business in 2021.
So while you and Ruby were together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but there were, at that period it was pretty nebulous. I don't know.
What's that word mean?
It was just a lot of talk, and there weren't solid plans. It was, let's start by doing podcasts together, and then that's all I know. I know that they published a book together recently. You can find it on Amazon.
Trying to act like that's all I know. You literally just said you listen to their podcast every week.
Business thriving, life was good between those two?
Well, not that I was aware.
Well, at some point, and again, I'm not digging into your life, but I'm trying to understand this. At some point,
We
they
took,
kick you out.
when you talk about a business, thriving,
Uh-huh.
in terms of business and money, when we stopped 8 passengers on YouTube, we lost 90% of our income. So to say that business was thriving, in my perspective, no.
Got it.
I don't think it ever was.
When they stopped filming their kids, they lost their income.
Reason for separation after you guys ended 8 passengers?
Was that part of the reason? The reasons are because of ways that I treated my wife, and some of my own addictions that I was working through and seeking help on with pornography.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I've made some wonderful progress.
Is that something you came to the realization that you needed help and weren't doing things right, or is that something that Jodi helped you guys recognize that maybe Ruby needed more? I'm trying to understand her involvement in your guys' life. She's my focus, just to be honest.
I understand, and I can perceive that. Jodi and Ruby have a close relationship, and Jodi saw the need for me to get help, and frankly, I agree. This space has been exactly what I need to face, my own addictions and receive the support and help that I've needed. And so this space has been very, very good for me.
So when you stated that you and Ruby had this no contact that you guys just verbally agreed upon, was that an idea given by Jodi that she recommended you guys have that space and not contact one another?
I'm not aware of that. The invitation for me to leave and take space was from my wife.
Okay.
But that was while Jodi and Ruby were friends and collaborating and doing podcasts and
Sure.
Well, you're the custodial parent of these children. I don't see why we can't explain to you what why we're involved. So I don't recall the exact time, but sometime before 11 o'clock today, we received a phone call from 911 on our dispatch that a 12 to 13-year-old boy was knocking on doors in a neighborhood asking for food and water, that he was severely emaciated, that he had...
What is emaciated mean?
Skinny, scrawny, malnutrition, not enough food, not enough water to sustain life. So he had...
I'm sorry, what?
He had duct tape on his extremities, on his hands, on his ankles, and those were covering rope burns that were used to tie him down. Take a second and think about what I just said. That's the condition of your son. Given that information, your son was taken to the hospital. A warrant has been applied and granted by the Department of Child and Family Services to remove both from your wife's care. So no one right now is going to have access to these two children based on their physical condition. Do you understand that?
I understand.
Would you condone that behavior?
Would I condone that behavior?
That's my job. My job is to find out your knowledge of the treatment of these
Based on your
precious
description,
children.
no. Again, I don't know the details, or I don't know what's going on. But as you described that sounds
Horrible. Disgusting. No.
I don't know about his reaction. I know people have different ways that they handle things, and I don't want to judge people's initial reaction to hearing something horrific that like you couldn't even imagine being done to your child. I'm sure, maybe some people would have a reaction like his, but to me, it seems off. Like, I don't know the details, but based on what you're saying, no, I wouldn't condone it. I just feel like it is such like an empty response to what you're hearing. Because I think most of us had a bigger reaction to hearing the condition of his own son than he just did. And that to me is disturbing because he looks like he doesn't feel much of anything about this.
No human being should be treated like that.
okay.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah, okay. This is weird. This is weird.
We're gonna sit here for a second, okay? We're gonna go out and talk. I'm not saying you're still not free to go. Are you under arrest? Absolutely not. We just have lots of questions that we need to figure out. Lots. Okay?
Okay, because...
Your children are under medical care right now.
And what does that mean?
And it means that you don't have access to them. My understanding is that they are, what is that?
They're in the custody of DCFS.
And they will be for the next 7
There's a medical hold on them right now. So for at least the next 72 hours, based on our understanding.
At least the next 70.
They're in observation.
They're-
They're being watched. to make sure
DCFS
they-
is going to provide you that information and they can better answer your questions along those lines. That's handled through them. Okay? So we'll be back in
So I
just a
want you to
few
think
minutes.
about some things though.
I don't know.
Listen to me. Listen to me.
His response is just weird.
I want you to think about that for a minute. Don't have no idea where they're at.
He hasn't asked at all.
Either. But,
Okay, we're gonna hop out here. We'll be back in a minute, okay? That's still recording audio and video, okay? So if you would, don't make any phone calls.
sure.
The way that he responded to this is just like, you haven't asked any questions about your kids, about their whereabouts, about their condition. They had to willingly give him that information because he didn't ask. He didn't ask where they were, what hospital they were at, why can't I see them? you know, seeing that, it doesn't make it that hard to believe that he did just fully, you know, here, Ruby, take them, because there's not a lot of care here that I'm seeing. This is a neglectful parent. Wait till you guys hear what he says when the cops come back.
What's going to happen to my wife? I love my wife.
I don't know. I'm being honest with you. I don't know. Haven't had anything to do with
I
you.
don't know if those charges against my wife.
Possibly.
He just heard the condition his son was under, and the first thing he says is, what is going to happen to my wife? And he's crying about Ruby, not his son. This man is disgusting. Like, he's sitting here going, what's going to happen to my wife? I love my wife. He hasn't said anything about his kids. He hasn't said he loves his kids. What's going to happen to my kids? Nothing. You take this and you combine this reaction with his jail calls with Ruby, where he said, I'm committed to this marriage. I'm going to do whatever I can to get our kids back. They're cooperating and working together to make the situation easier. Also, he got her lawyer for her. He found the lawyer for her. He was helping her.
Haven't had anything to do with
I
you.
don't know if those charges against my wife.
Possibly.
He's more concerned about Ruby. I'm disgusted.
I think given the circumstances, that's highly appropriate. But again, I don't know your wife. I was hoping to gain some insight from you, but I don't necessarily know that that's something you wanted to,
I trust her.
a road you wanted to travel down with me. So
He just said, I trust her. He heard the condition that they found his son in. This is not a rumor, a speculation. This is not alleged. They found his son like this. They told him how they found his son. And he's saying, I trust my wife.
Not without legal representation.
yeah, all right, I get it.
But I love my wife and I trust my wife. And so, I mean, this feels like getting run over by a steam truck while you're sharing with me today.
Yeah, I can tell you're caught off guard.
I thought I was just coming here to pick up my kids, and for what, I don't know what or why.
Because you didn't ask. You don't know what or why because you never asked.
And I was planning on taking them back with me, and just,
I mean, I'd love to have a candid conversation with you. I just don't know how it's going to be received by you. I don't know you, but I can tell you my perception of how this happened.
well, I'm
Whether you value
interested
that or not, it's...
look, I'm interested in facts, but again, at the same time, I'm
Delusional?
I'm interested in all the facts.
But you understand our facts. Our facts are that you have a child that is emaciated, malnutrition, and has marks. I didn't spend any time with her. Sergeant Tobler did.
Did any of you spend time with her?
He's still asking, did you guys spend time with her? He's not even asking, did you guys see my son? Did you see this for yourself? He's asking about Ruby this entire time. He has not asked one question about his kids. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. I don't ever want to see his face again.
I have not. She was requested to go to the hospital along with, based on their condition.
He's more concerned with his wife. This man is weak.
Like, I want to. You realize that I have a picture of my family on my wall, and I look at it every day, and I work every day, so I can get back to my family and save my family. And everything you're sharing to me just sounds like a made-up story. Like
To get back to his family and save his family, he said. Save him from what? You don't know anything, right? What is he talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It sounds like a horror movie.
Imagine how your kids feel. Imagine how your kids feel. They're completely forgotten about by their own dad. And their mom. Imagine how they feel. And then their dad's just asking about Ruby in these clips and saying that he loves her.
And I get you're all doing your jobs. I get it. I understand. And this is my life. I just want my kids.
There you go.
I just want my kids. I just want my family.
We want to have you
I don't know what's going on. I don't know why these things that you described happened. I don't know.
Does the why matter? Does the why they happened matter? What matters is that they happened. It doesn't matter why. The question isn't what did they do that made this happen to them?
It's almost like I want to say, I'm sorry, you must have somebody else. Because it's like, am I in the right conference room here? No. That's what it's real, I'm having a hard time accepting this and dealing with this.
Yeah, and you continue to have a hard time accepting it when you talk to Ruby.
You're telling me that you're taking my kids from me.
You're telling me you're taking my kids from me? You haven't had them in over a year, right? You haven't seen them, haven't asked about their condition, haven't asked how they are, haven't shown up to see them one time in over a year, but they're taking your kids from you, that you haven't asked about their condition, how they are, if they're okay, if they're safe. Nothing.
We need to transfer the titles of the car to my name, or we're going to cancel these credit cards and stuff like that. So just stuff related to the finances really is our only communication.
Probably because you don't ask any question about your kids ever.
We've had zero communications regarding the kids.
That is so disgusting.
I've had no reason to believe or think that there was anything going on. For all intents and purposes, I woke up this morning looking at the picture of my family and making my commitment today, as I do every day, that I'm going to live an honest, a virtuous, and a responsible life today. And what you're sharing with me just feels like a sucker punch.
Just imagine. Brianna, do you have questions? Okay.
If I still have a family,
Yeah.
and I just I don't know what my plan. My plan is to go to God
Sure.
and to figure this out.
Right.
And I am just heartbroken what you all are sharing with me. And I feel responsible. Separating, leaving. It hurts. And I wish I was a better husband.
You wish you were a better husband. Everything is about Ruby and his marriage, him and Ruby. Not, I wish I was a better father. I wish I checked on my kids. I wish I was a better husband.
I know you're all doing your jobs.
This shows me where his head's at.
I know you all have the best interests of my kids in mind. I appreciate that.
They did more for your kids than you did.
Thanks.
That means a lot.
I just want my kids back. I want my family back. I want my wife back.
You want your wife back after all this? Like I was saying, I understand that, in a situation like this, you are going to be completely thrown off guard if you don't know the things that are happening to your kids and you hear something like that. We may not have a reaction that we would think that we would have. So in a normal situation, I wouldn't want to judge somebody's initial reaction to hearing something like what he heard. But because I've been so cautious of the fact that I believe that he knew more, when I see this, it just confirms all my speculation that I had and all the feelings that I had that something was just off. There's so many red flags in that first police interview where he says he loves his wife so many times. He doesn't want to lose his wife. He felt like he could have been a better husband. He doesn't say, I could have been a better dad. I wish I had been a better dad. I wish I had checked on my kids, made sure they're okay. He never asks where they are. He never asks, why can't I see them? He never says, when can I see them? Is there a number I can call? He doesn't ask any questions at all. But you know what he does do? He gets on a jail call with his wife and talks about how he's committed to their marriage and he's going to do whatever he can to get their kids back for them. I know that now that there was a divorce that was filed, but I think that that's because of what it looks like. I don't think that has anything to do with them not actually having a thing still. I think that he tried to act more clueless than he was personally. I mean, I guess after watching that, maybe he never did ask about his kids because he didn't ask about his kids in that, did he? It just gets worse. Now, I have heard some things about this next one we're going to listen to, and we're going to go ahead and hop into it. This is just an audio though, so we're going to go ahead and begin this one. I've heard that there's some weird paranormal stuff in this one, and it just takes it to a whole other level. And if you guys have watched all of my videos on this, then you've heard me compare Ruby Franke to Lori Vallow. This is where it gets even more like that from what I've seen, but I have not heard the full thing, so let's go ahead and get into it.
Thanks for meeting with us.
Were you there the first?
I was there. I don't think I interviewed with you.
Okay.
Lieutenant Studley was
that
with
time.
me the first time.
I don't
So.
remember a lot.
Yeah, oh, you're okay.
I don't blame you. A lot all at once, and
Usually long time no see is a good thing when you're dealing with a detective.
Yeah, but I know that both of my kids have mentioned both of you by names, and particularly with you. And
Good kid.
Do you guys by chance have a card?
I do in the car,
I don't have
Okay.
a
but
phone.
not
Okay.
on. So I'll grab that for you though.
Okay.
So, like I talked to Mr. Ketcher about, I just want this to be totally ran by you. I won't ask you any questions that are incriminating. We're not looking at you as a suspect or anything like that. We just are more curious of the dynamic and Jodi coming into your relationship, your lives. So, if you kind of just want to walk us through that on how she came into your lives and then where things started to change.
Jodi, you mean?
Jodi.
I
Jodi.
thought you said Julie, but
Oh,
you
Jodi.
meant
Jodi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jodi. Yeah.
yeah, I can do that. I'll ask first, have you found the pen papers?
The pen papers. So we found quite a bit of
They're-
different
We
journals.
believe they're on the computer, and the rest of them were sealed, like they're trying to mail them off. But we do.
Okay, I'm going to say this right at the beginning of this. I feel like somewhere, and maybe some of these jail calls we haven't heard or letters that were sent back and forth, that they decided that they were going to try and paint it as Ruby was brainwashed by Jodi and that Jodi was crazy and that she convinced her to do all of this stuff. And you can see where it flips in the jail calls where suddenly Ruby talks completely differently. It went from them talking about how much they trusted Jodi to suddenly they don't trust her at all. I think that there was some sort of cooperation going on. That was the angle they were going to try and come from, and I don't believe it at all. And I think Kevin's a part of it, allegedly. And I think that this is him right here trying to be like, he's trying to paint a picture here for Ruby. I haven't even heard this, and I can tell at the very beginning that's what he's talking about.
I don't have a direct copy of it, no.
Because my understanding was we had purchased as a Christmas present for Jodi in 2021 a leather folder that, 3 inches thick or whatever, and it had engraved on the leather on the outside the pen papers, and Ruby wrote detailed notes of everything, all interactions with Jodi and Pam Botcher from August 2021 until I don't know when.
And you're saying something is it like a satchel-looking leather bit, or is it more like a binder?
No, it's like I don't even know what to call it. But
it's flat.
So you
just like
see,
a short, because we do have Ruby's journal, which is from those dates that you mentioned.
these things are going to be so. She wouldn't write the stuff she wrote in the pen paper. She would not write in her journal. The stuff she wrote in the pen papers was not intended to be read by anybody until God would decree them to be written as scripture for the whole world to read.
Okay.
See, he's sitting here, he's talking about Jodi's, it says pen papers are where Jodi kept her visions, right? Now, what the police is referring to is the journals they found of Ruby, which we'll go over in a later video, where she details that she inflicted on the children. Like, we're not going to talk about that, guys. We're going to talk about where Jodi kept her visions, not the ones that are extremely incriminating to Ruby and what she did. Let's talk about Jodi's visions. He's painting a picture, or trying to, and failing miserably.
I believe that's what we have.
Okay.
Because you're saying the pen would be different, correct? Like a...
Well, it was just in a thing called the pen papers. So it was, and that's how Ruby referred to those papers. Yeah. So it described all of the visions and trances and everything that Jodi and Ruby went into.
How thick would you say it was?
It was like 3 inches thick or so. And there were hundreds of pages of written documents that Ruby had. And that was given to Jodi in 2022 when she left and returned to her home in January. So
this is similar.
Yeah, like it would look like that.
Okay.
That's not the journal that we have, so...
No, I think you're talking, it looks like a satchel. Or
It's something Jodi would not want found.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't want to destroy it.
Because we didn't find that in the home.
We found an empty one.
We did find an empty one.
I remember saying anything on it, though. There's an empty thing like that,
Yeah.
and there's a full thing, but it was...
If the empty one says the pen papers on the outside of it, then they emptied it.
I don't remember.
We'll go back through our photos and see if that's...
Yeah.
Because everything in the home was photographed. So.
If you're interested in Pam Botcher,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to tie Pam Botcher to all of this, what's in those documents. Okay, so...
Can I just interrupt for a minute? I'm sorry.
Sure.
You can just tell that Kevin and Ruby have had a conversation at this point.
Is it okay to bring the puppies?
Yes, we want the puppies, right?
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you finish here and then call me when you're done, and we'll...
Okay.
Will you let the bailiff know we're in here so she can bring us a copy of the order?
Okay, let me see if I can find it.
Okay.
Thank you. In 2018, we were cycled. That's going to be hard to find in today's world. Good luck. Ruby had a very close friend named Paige Hannah, who lives in Mapleton, who was a massive fan of Connections and Jodi Hildebrandt. And in fact, the Hannahs are on the cover of their book. If you've probably seen them. And so Ruby started to speak with Jodi towards the end of 2018, early 2019, with the intention of having her be the therapist. Jodi always had a larger interest in communicating with the parents more than with the actual patient, which I always found curious. But her theory was, if you want to help your child, you have to help yourself first, and then you'll know how to help the child. So she spoke with Ruby frequently, and the frequency of their communications ramped up. And then the first conversation that Jodi had with Chad was in June of 2019 while we were on a trip to the East Coast. All of her visits with Chad were virtual through Zoom. But she would talk with Ruby on the phone or through Zoom quite frequently. So Jodi met with things got really, it got.
I feel like Kevin knows a lot for someone who didn't know anything. You see what I mean? He also says that he always thought it was odd about Jodi, like certain things that he just said. Like, but you left your kids with her? You trusted her? You said that in your first interview. Something happened between this interview and the first one. And it was communication with Ruby, probably with the lawyer that he got for her, which means he was communicating with the lawyer too. The lawyer is probably the one who told him, listen, you need to file for divorce because it'll look good. I don't trust him.
Strange around the fall of 2020, the Hannahs were trying to convince and bring Ruby into thank you. Into this organization called Connections, and that particularly were focused on things like lust versus love, and healthy marriages, happier marriages, happier relationships. She invited me to go to it was like a conference or something held at Thanksgiving Point in Lehigh. And there were like 100 people there, and that was in the fall of 2019, maybe late summer 2019, late summer 2019. And my impression at that time was this is absolute craziness. This is a bunch of man-hating women that are just looking for excuses to tear down their husbands, and I mean that's what it felt like to me when I was in there. But it was confusing because there were people that I respected a lot that were up on the stage with microphones in hand, giving testimonials of how great this was and how
it felt like that to him, right? But he's the one that proceeded to listen to the woman that was being told by these man-hating women that you need to move out and have no communication with me or your children or ask me questions about their well-being. And he knew at the time that this wasn't okay. He knew then. No.
Changed their lives and their marriage, and like the Hannahs were among them, and so yeah, it was confusing. Ruby, then we went on a trip with the Hannahs to the UK in October of 2019.
Who's the Hannahs?
And I swear the whole objective of the trip was to convince me to get into Connections, because all of them were in it except me, but they made some really eloquent arguments, and I agreed to join a men's group with Jodi in January of 2020, and I would do it for 3 months. So I started that men's group in 2020, and the group, I don't know if you've ever been to an addiction recovery group, but that's what it was. That's what it felt like. I mean, there were probably 10 men in there. It was on Zoom. All of them were working through, you know, various stages of like sex addiction, porn addiction, drug addiction, and it was just it was like a 12-step group, but intended just for general like addiction recovery. And I really was like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I don't belong here. But everyone's like, no, come here, like you can learn to have a better like life and a better marriage. And so I thought, okay, whatever. I went through my obligatory 3 months, and I was ready to leave. And then I got challenged to. Oh, thank you. And then
But in the previous interview with the police, he said he had a corn addiction, and that the separation that was recommended for him to, I don't know, I guess fix that addiction, being away from Ruby, which literally makes no sense to me. But he said it was working. But now he's saying this.
I got challenged to sit down and have a vulnerable conversation with my wife and ask her how my lustful choices have affected her. And, you know, to me that was like a loaded question. I thought, you know, I still didn't see what I had done or anything that would constitute any form of like, you know, abuse or anything like that. And but I did. I took the challenge and I sat down, and for 2 hours Ruby very emotionally just shared how she felt in our marriage and how the things that I over 20 years of marriage, you know, asking for sex as a husband frequently, or asking her to wear lingerie or things like that, how that made her feel. And it was really emotional, and it touched me. Like, I didn't realize that she felt so strongly about that she felt so hurt by that. And so I committed that I would really give it a go. And I stayed in the men's group. And so, you know, in that men's group, I met with Jodi every week, with the other men that were in the group. And then it got weird because like our marriage felt like it was getting better and stronger. So this was now, you know, summer and fall of 2020, and in addition to that, there was the whole YouTube cancel thing. I don't know how much you guys are even interested or aware of that, but in May of 2020, some videos that Ruby released on that dealt with Chad just blew up in her face, and it was all over the news, and hundreds of thousands of TikTokers and all this stuff were just piling on and basically burned down like our YouTube channel. And overnight, like the income went, you know, we lost 90% of the income overnight, and that was hard.
Was this like the, which episode was this? Is this the one where they talked about like the beanbag? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they started going back and trying to dig and find, and then they'd find their little nuggets like, oh, look, you went to school without a lunch one day, or, you know, stuff like that. And, but it was the beanbag video that really set people off, and then they went back from there. Mm-hmm. So
I want everybody to just process how he downplayed what we were seeing, which had to do with starvation of these children. And he downplayed it in this even, like it wasn't that big of a deal.
At that time, Ruby was really distraught, and she was looking for support. She was looking for someone who would understand her, who would validate her, and she found that in Jodi. All the stuff she did with Chad was because of Jodi, and so it makes sense that she would go to Jodi, you know, for emotional support when she felt like her world was burning down. In the meantime, like I felt like our marriage was getting stronger. It felt better. Like we didn't fight as much, even though we were having less sex, it felt more connecting, and it was just, I thought, wow, this is great, like, you know, this is great. And I was happy to be the guy up on the stage. You know, that started sometime in like late 2020 or the fall of 2020. There would be a conference, and Ruby would say, I thought we were just attending it, but then she'd say, hey, they wanted us to get up and tell our story, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And so I get up and just say, like, yeah, I was the guy who said, I think this is a bunch of, like, you know, man-hating, you know, women, but it really has made a difference in my marriage, and it really did, like, I believed it. And so those conferences and stuff, everything continued like that until March of 2021, when after a conference, a connections conference down in St. George, all the inner circle, all the people who were being trained as, you know, mental fitness coaches and stuff. So that was Ruby and a bunch of other people and their spouses. We went out to like a dinner afterwards, and that's where Jodi really opened up to the women in a private conversation that she believed she was being tormented and haunted by shadow figures every night, and that was spooky, you know. And I don't know exactly what happened, but the Hannahs do. All I know is at some point, within a couple days of that, in that month of March, the Hannahs drove down from Mapleton and picked Jodi up and brought her back to their home in Mapleton, and she lived for 6 weeks in that home in Mapleton. And this is where, like, I don't know what happened, but I do know that there's two different sides of stories. They tried to introduce her to a new cult lady that the Hannahs were getting into, so they wanted to merge their cults into one, apparently.
Who are the Hannahs?
They referred to it as a cult at the time?
Oh, no. No one in a cult says, I'm in a cult.
Right. I was wondering. But from your perspective, it looked like two cult leaders merging together.
From where I stand now, absolutely. According to Jodi, she was held against her will for 6 weeks and was kidnapped, and she escaped and got out. According to the Hannahs, after 6 weeks of Jodi stabbing herself with forks and knives, cutting herself, and wanting to commit suicide and trying to seduce the husband of the family, they kicked her out. I don't know what's the truth. Maybe a little bit of both, I don't know. But the point is, somewhere around mid-April, Jodi was back in her home in Ivins, and she was a hot mess. And she reached out to Ruby.
Hold on. So he heard all this stuff about Jodi and then proceeds to, in his first police interview, say that she was a trustworthy person and that he trusted her, that she was a good person. And he heard all this stuff and also allowed his children to live with her.
For help. And Ruby was always jealous of the Hannahs, that they had a better relationship with Jodi than she did. Ruby, and this is like, goes back to her childhood. She wanted to be the best friend. She wanted to be the most liked. She wanted to be the one that everybody knew. And so it hurt her that she felt like she was being excluded from what was going on at the Hannahs' house. And then she'd say, why so many secrets? And the Hannahs would say, it's not secret, it's sacred. And when the time's right, you can know too, you know. So we went down to Jodi's house in May of 2021. That was the first time I'd ever been there.
I just want to say this is deep. Like, there are a lot of people involved in this that are not locked up right now. Is anybody checking on their kids?
And it blew my mind, as I'm sure you have walked in there and gone, how does a therapist live like this? Like, it didn't make sense to me. But we were there, and she opened up and talked about, you know, her struggles and what was going on. And I gotta say, like, I'm a smart guy. I'm an engineer. I've designed and helped build some really big stuff. I've been a college professor. I can't explain some of the stuff that happened while we were there. Like crashes in the basement while we were talking upstairs, and plates like in the kitchen just flying off by themselves, like full speed, smashing on the wall and falling to the floor like by themselves. I can't explain it, but I saw it with my own eyes, and I don't have any way to explain it other than there's some crazy shit going on. Ruby was convinced that...
I don't know what I just heard. This interview is so weird, it's creeping me out. I mean, that place is probably haunted because Jodi lives there and all her evil negative energy and all the bad ghosty goos want to go hang around her.
We could intervene and help Jodi. I didn't want a thing to do with it. I tried to like get the bishop involved and say, hey, go to the priesthood and the church and all that stuff. Just go to your support network. But Ruby continued to be like, no, we can help. Like, she doesn't want the... Could you imagine like what happened to her reputation if this got out and stuff? Let's help her. So we went down like a couple more times between May and August, but it reached the point where in August, her bishop at the time, a guy who's down there in Kayenta named Scott Galbraith, he's not our bishop anymore, but I mean, he was going over there like every night, and he'd be there for like 4 hours, and he'd be like, I'm fighting evil spirits, I'm casting demons out, I'm there's crazy stuff going on, and finally he got to the point where he's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, there needs to be some sort of resolution. It was at that point that they said, why don't you take her up to your house? And I was like, oh, hell no. I don't want this in my house. But I was beaten over the head with it. Like, that's really insensitive. You know, she's done so much to help our family, and you're being selfish, and she has needs, and come on, like, it won't be for long. And so I relented, and I was like, okay, actually, you know, this could kind of be fun. Let's just make it fun.
That's very telling. He didn't want this a woman in his own house, and he let his kids be alone with her. Does he think this made him look better, saying all this? I mean, he said himself, self-proclaimed smart man. I highly disagree.
And we'll, like, she needs a vacation, so we'll just go take drives up the canyon and stuff like that. And it turned into just a crazy house. The moment she showed up in my house, just the weirdest crap started happening. Lights turning on and off, sounds of people walking in walls, and like sounds like footprints going up walls and across the ceiling, and like stuff floating around, and it was weird, and I hated it. And I became the resident exorcist. That was the title I came up with myself. I thought it was kind of funny, but it was my job to like go and give her blessings whenever she started to like go into a trance and go into possession, and which started to be a lot. and Ruby would go up and check on her. It started like every 4 hours at night, and then it moved every 2 hours at night, then it moved every hour at night, and then at some point Ruby said, you know what, I'm just going to start sleeping in there, and if I need you, I'll come down and get you. I'm like, that's kind of weird, but okay. And that was that. They started sleeping in the same bed, and
oh my God. How did this just get weirder? Okay, first of all, Ruby and Jodi, I've heard some allegations that they had a little relationship going on, allegedly. That is very weird that they just started sleeping together. And why would you want to sleep with like somebody that's possessed anyways? You know what I mean? Like, what in the world? So he would go in there and exorcise the demons out of Jodi for like 4 hours a night. And it was happening so much that Ruby's like, oh, I'll just stay in there with the demon. We'll just sleep together. I'll let you know if I need your help. What in the hell is this craziness? These people are crazy. Anyways, all of this stuff happened before he left his kids there. Let's not forget the interview we just heard where he said he trusted Jodi. These people are crazy. I wish I could see the faces of the police officers interviewing him.
Dances and stuff, I would say probably September, where she believed that she was going to heaven and seeing God and Jesus and talking with him. And she would get together with Pam Botcher. Ruby, Pam, and Jodi would get together and do these interventions. That's what they call them. And so they'd just go up and lock themselves in a room for 4 or 5 hours, and then they'd come out and they'd all just be on cloud nine, and Ruby would share with me like she had this amazing vision, and I wrote it and recorded it all down, and we have a work to do from God, and you're part of it, and the bishop's part of it, and we're all part of bringing all this stuff to the world. And so it was...
This is Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell shit right here. And they're so self-important. Like, they think that they are so important and so needed.
And it continued like that until I wanted to move on with life. And I would call it dragging my heels. So that was around October. And Jodi flipped out because during one intervention, Chad was in the backyard with a bunch of friends. And it was my job to keep all the kids contained in the basement watching movies or playing video games. And I took the dog on a walk, and I thought they were done, but they weren't done. And Chad had all his high school friends over in the backyard. Jodi flipped out. She was ready to come back to Ivan's on her own that night, and Ruby and Pam talked her into staying. But that was the first night where Ruby said, I want a separation from you. And it was an in-home separation. And so it was, it was hard. Basically, there were all these rules now placed on me. Like, I could leave when I wanted, but I couldn't come back until Ruby gave me permission. I couldn't come into the kitchen to eat until Ruby gave me permission. And the upstairs where Jodi roamed was completely off limits. I couldn't go upstairs anymore in my own house. And there would be, Ruby would dictate all of the terms of how our interactions would be, when we would talk, and that was hard. And it was during that time that I really became, I would say, dependent upon Ruby. Like, if she said a kind word to me, like, my whole day was made, right? And so that separation continued all the way up until the holidays, maybe the last week of December, first week of January, and then Ruby ended that separation. Jodi went home the second week of January. But by that time, like Ruby, Pam, and Jodi were completely determined to do this work that they felt God had for them. And I thought it was crazy. Like, I thought it was just batshit crazy. Like, Ruby, you have a reputation, you have a multi-million-dollar business, you have a brand, and you are just giving it away. She wanted to legally, like, work with Jodi's attorney to basically give Jodi 8 passengers and become an employee of Connections. So basically the contract was Ruby gives Jodi everything and Ruby gets nothing in return. Our manager, our YouTube manager at the time was like, red flags, like, I don't know how to tell you, she is scamming you. Ruby fired him. And I was like, I believe our manager, I think he's right, and Ruby started threatening me with another separation. And just like, this isn't about money, this is about doing God's work. And so we continued in that dynamic for the next 6 or 7 months until she went on a trip with Jodi and Pam down to Arizona. And I think they, like, when I read her journal, she went into Mexico or something and bought drugs or something, like prescription drugs for the emergency kits. And when she came back from that trip, before she even brought the bags into the house, she pulled me in and said, I want to talk with you. And that's when she asked me to leave. And that was July 20th, 2022. My interactions with Jodi at that point became one of Jodi. I was still in the men's groups, but the dynamic changed. Instead of being like one of the top people that helped run groups and helped support, all of a sudden I felt like I got knocked to the bottom. And Jodi was just piling on me every week in the men's groups. And the other men just do whatever Jodi does. If Jodi piles on somebody, they all pile on. If Jodi praises somebody, they all praise. And so it really felt like a pack of dogs, and Jodi was the alpha. And whoever she, sicked the dogs on, they would go. Whoever she praised, the dogs would just lick them up and down. And that's how these groups went. And so once I was in separation, every week was just hell, psychological hell. And Jodi was running it. Everything was on Zoom. And I knew that the only way I would ever get back into my house was I had to get Jodi's approval. If I didn't get Jodi's approval, I would never get Ruby's approval.
I gotta stop this right here because I have some things that I want to say. Kevin knows a lot in this clip for someone who in the previous clip acted like he didn't know anything. Not only does he know a lot, but Jodi lived with him and Ruby and those children. And all of this stuff's going on where they're exorcising demons out of her in the home. He is instructed to keep the kids in the basement while they're doing all that weird stuff they're doing. He knows a lot, okay? I have a really hard time believing that he didn't know some of the things that were going on involving the children. There's no talk of the children in this at all. He doesn't want to talk about the children in this because I think there was stuff going on with them. Even then, he was there. He lived with her. I think he was a part of more than he wants to let on. I mean, in the first clip, he's sitting there acting like he didn't know anything at all about what was going on. He trusted Jodi, and now we're hearing this. This is not the same man that was talking in the first clip. This guy thinks that he's going to paint Jodi as some crazy person and that he's going to look like he just was brainwashed like Ruby. No, this is a very weird thing. And also in the first one, he wasn't really talking much. And in this one, he's just spilling all of this stuff, right? About Jodi and connections and the Hannahs, whoever they are. I don't know. Something smells fishy to me.
But it felt like an impossible task, because no matter what I did, no matter how like much I tried to track better, be, truthful and not be selfish, every week it was like, you're being manipulative, you're being selfish, you're lying, you're hiding something, you're still hiding stuff. And I really started to like question my sanity, honestly.
After Jodi that we were talking about.
And so that continued for an entire year, but it became more and more isolated until Jodi had an approved list of men that I could make phone calls to, and it was basically 3 men. But all 3 of those 3 men were like, we don't want to do phone calls with you anymore because you're being manipulative. And I'm like, well, who told you that? Well, Jodi did. So I was completely cut off. And if I went to my church leaders, I was seeking enablement. If I went to my family, I was seeking enablement. If I went to anybody, I was seeking enablement. And so it felt like a no-win. I felt trapped. And that's where I was all the way up until the last week of July, when Jodi called me one day out of the blue and just said, I don't understand why you're not getting it. You're not changing. I don't get it. So I've been asking God what to do, and God told me that you need just to have complete, what's the word they would use? Solitude with God.
Become a monk.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, I don't want you to come to men's group anymore. And I don't want you to do phone calls with any of the men. And I'm like, well, then who am I going to talk with? Who's going to support me? God will. You need to learn to go to God. And so I'm just like, there's nobody. I'm going to be completely cut off. And she's like, no, you'll have God. So that was the last week of July, and that was my last interaction and contact with Jodi. But it was strange because around that time, things with Ruby started like picking up, and I didn't understand why, but like Ruby wanted to meet in a parking lot and wanted me to sign over titles of documents, like the 2 of our cars, wanted me to sign them over to her name. And
To Ruby.
Mm-hmm. But I was like, okay, I'm just not, I'm in total compliance mode at this point. Just like, I'm a good husband, you see, you can trust me, and so whatever she asked, like, sign over the cars to me, no questions, just okay. And then another thing, she was like, I might want to do an investment, but I will need your signature. Do you trust me enough that I could get your signature if I wanted to pursue my own investment? Yeah, sure. Whatever you say.
How big of an investment? What's she talking about? What did she tell you?
She never did, and I never signed anything. She never brought anything to me. But when I returned to the house, everything was packed up, and a neighbor came over and said she asked for the HOA rules and mentioned to him that she wanted to rent the house out, which I was like, are you kidding me? And apparently she wanted to sell the house, but couldn't because my name was on the mortgage. And I think that's what she was talking about, of, will you sign something if I just put it in front of you? And you know what? I probably would have. Like, that's how messed up I was.
I'm glad you didn't.
Me too. That would have been disastrous.
Yeah.
But I can't describe to you what torture and hell it was to live an entire, it was more than a month really, in complete isolation. Believing that I was like evil and, I mean, manipulative.
Imagine how your
lying,
kids felt.
Selfish, and that I had abandoned my family, and that I was more interested in my selfishness than my family.
And I think moving forward, you going through that is going to be extremely helpful. I felt that way because a lot of those are the same words that were used with them, and you're going to understand how they felt, you know.
We've already talked about that,
Yeah.
actually. And the couple of times we've met, I've said, this is how I felt. Did you feel that way? Like, yes, this is how I felt. Like, when we each confessed to things that we didn't do, I'm like, I confessed to things I never did. But I was so scared. And he's like, that's what I did too. So we connected on that level, you know. And it's crazy that anybody can get to that level of desperation, but we were there. We were there.
And this is the end of July, what you're saying? End of July of 2022, or the last time you saw Jodi was
23.
23. Okay.
The last communication I had with Jodi was the last week of July. It might have been like the first couple days of August, but just
So
that
it's just
little
shortly before we made contact with you.
Yeah,
Or
a
you
month.
made contact with us.
A month before.
Yeah.
Okay. So for that whole month, my life was literally wake up, exercise, go to work, pretend everything's okay, come home, do connections like workbooks and read scriptures and try to strip selfishness out of my life. Like, go to bed, wake up, repeat every day, boom, 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 boom. I mean, I was so upside down. And my plan was in 6 months I get to reach back out to Jodi again, and she'll let me back in the group, and then I can prove. Oh, I don't know if I heard a door knock, but
I don't know if I did too.
Might be your kids.
might be. Oh,
And we can,
has it been an hour? I told you it wouldn't take an hour. I'm
and
sorry.
we're good too if you need to head out. That was seriously,
I guess
we
the
just
only-
wanted, yeah.
The only questions I would have, and just going back, you said that she was having like these visions of like were you ever privy enough to understand or be told what those visions were?
A couple of them.
What were the two that they should tell you about?
So, like, one of them, she was walking along the beach with Jesus, and Jesus challenged her to go walk on the water, and it was a whole lesson on walking on the water. Another, she would walk with Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and she learned about, she had a pet lion in heaven named Charles. I don't know why I never forgot that name, but it was like this massive lion, and she got to ride the lion and learned that, you know, all about who she was and this pet lion and all. There was another one where
Oh my God,
there
these
was a
people
lot
are
of satanic
crazy.
ones where when she would go into possession mode, she would talk in like different voices. It was really creepy. But the voices would say, she's ours, we're not letting go. She is Satan's bride. She's
Like, Jodi never got married and had kids, and it's funny because she was trying to break up all these marriages in her weird connections cult, and then she would have these, I don't know, possession moments where like the demon or the devil or whatever that was in her wanted to marry her. I'm sorry.
He was trying to, or Satan wanted her as her bride.
Then you said, just clarifying, so the last time you saw the kids was when you separated that in July, is that what I'm thinking? Of 2022. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I'm just really interested in the pen papers. Like, for my own curiosity, I want to know what was going on in all of those little interventions. And
I'll look back through the photos because, like I said, we documented everything in the home, whether we took it or if we didn't. And then I'll reach out to Mr. Kester and let you know.
So I have
But-
a couple of observations when you're done.
Yeah, go for it.
So I always thought it was interesting, now that you mentioned that she was riding a lion. Kevin told me that when they were having these group meetings, she would never show up. She would show up on the WebEx, but in place of her person would just be this X for the connection. So it's like this Wizard of Oz thing going on. And I just thought that
she
was
never
kind
showed
of-
her face.
Kind of eerie.
She
Yeah.
always covered herself.
Yeah.
Like, even in the hottest of summer, she would wear these hoodies. She would smell so bad.
Yeah.
She would never bathe, but she was trying to hide her arms and stuff because apparently Ruby told me they were just like mutilated. And
So the other thing that I think it's important for them to know is during that whole time when you were out, you only had communication with Ruby maybe 3 or 4 times, but that each time, or at least on some of the occasions you spoke to her, she's telling you that everything's blissful, we're doing well, you know, everything's so much better without you. And
oh, that would be communicated to me by Jodi every week,
okay.
and the men's groups too. And it was just like, you're abandoning your family. And it always hurt so bad because it's like, I want to be with my family so bad. What do you mean I'm abandoning them? If you wanted to be with your family, you would change. You would stop being selfish. But you keep being selfish, so you want it. And it was just felt like, well, how do I stop wanting it then? It's like, then you must change. Well, how do I change? Well, you gotta want it. Well, what? You know, so how do I want it? You gotta change. It's this like
Perpetual cycle.
yeah,
And
there's no, I tried to find my way into that cycle, and it felt like, have you ever had a dream where there's like a problem you're trying to solve, but you can't solve it, and how frustrating you feel? That's what my life felt like. And as I'm looking back and I'm realizing there was no solution. You either had Jodi's approval or you didn't. I wasn't doing anything different than the other men in the group. But they got her approval, so they were praised and they were repenting and they were doing everything right. I, on the other hand, was manipulative and selfish and enabling and all blah, 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 blah. And she became like
He doesn't really say anything negative about his wife, and he also doesn't talk about his children at all. He doesn't talk about their treatment during that time, which to me is personally very telling. He doesn't say anything about any of the awful stuff Ruby did. It's basically what I said at the very beginning of this, that it just comes off like he's trying to paint this picture that Jodi was this crazy cult leader that pulled them all into it, manipulated them into it. And there's not a lot of responsibility being taken. There's not any focus put on the actual thing at hand, which was his children being severely abused, horrifically abused. He doesn't talk about that at all. It breaks my heart for these kids because all of the adults around them just did not care. They didn't care. Even in this, he doesn't talk about them at all.
the arbiter of truth, the arbiter of forgiveness, God's own mouthpiece, and it was just messed up.
Well, I'm glad that you're seeing
Realizing that.
clearly, you know, and
Coming out of the
kind of
fog.
came out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I have
Yeah.
one last
Mhm.
discussion. So, in the home, when the warrant was issued, there was a bag with $85,000 cash in it. And I understand her lawyer, Ruby's lawyer, has all that
I'm not.
Which home are we talking about?
Ivan.
In Ivan?
in the Ivan's home.
We don't know. The money was left where it was left. We didn't take it. Because the house was secured when we left. We're assuming that Lamar Windward
Yeah,
was
he
able
has
to
it.
retrieve it. But we don't, I can't tell you
Yeah.
one way or the other. if we do.
So here's kind of the issue. That money, she cleaned out their bank accounts.
The kids' savings account.
Yeah, and yours too, your joint account.
Yeah.
And that's where that money came from.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you can have, or if I need to have a discussion with the county attorney. Kevin would kind of like his kids' money back.
Yeah, so it would be civilly, so I would go address that.
Talk to Lamar.
Lamar,
see,
yeah.
see what those funds are being used for.
I don't,
If she cleared out their bank accounts, that honestly scares me. Like, what if Russell didn't escape and go get help when he did? I don't think that they would have lived much longer. I mean, they were talking about taking them out on this land out in the middle of nowhere.
I think they need to know that while Jodi was living in your home, she was also purportedly giving therapy to Chad, and Chad was
Every week.
paying her. And he's like,
At that time, we were
my
paying
God.
her.
oh, okay.
It wasn't until Chad moved out that part of his therapy
Wow.
was he needed to.
She stole from him.
Pay for his own therapy. So at age 17, he was paying her $900 a month to get brainwashed.
Dad at 17?
He did.
What was he doing for work?
He worked at
So Chad was paying Jodi 3 times the amount of his rent for therapy a week. What a scam artist. That's where she got that huge house we saw in the body cam footage. You know, I'm seeing some comments on this video where people are saying that, you know, they understand Kevin better now. They feel bad for him. I completely disagree. This comment right here, I want to remind everyone that this man knew the weird crap going on with Jodi and left his wife and Jodi with his kids. His negligence resulted in his kids being hurt. That's exactly how I feel. This, to me, this whole interview that he did was weird because he was talking so much more in this one than he was in the first one. I feel like he was trying to paint a picture, and he didn't say enough about Ruby in this for me to even be able to tell where he stood with Ruby at the time that he did this interview. And I'm not really even sure when the date of this one was. I'm not sure when the date of this interview was done, but it was obviously after the other one. I just find it strange that there's not like any talk of his kids at all. Also, where they're talking about how Ruby cleared out their kids' bank accounts, I'm honestly concerned that had Russell not escaped, that this would have ended in more of a fellow Daybell situation where her children ended up dead. I feel like Russell saved himself and his siblings that day when he escaped from the inevitable, because it was going to happen eventually because they were being starved. And I don't know. I'm really curious what you guys think about Kevin. I feel like there is a lot of concerning things in these clips to me. And I've seen a lot of people say that he's not going to get his kids. And I hope that you are all right, because the thought of him getting custody of his kids at all disturbs me. I think that he comes off like a very weak man. A disappointment. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching all this video. If you did, I know it was so long. I feel like we have been together for so long today. Usually my videos are much shorter than this, but I wanted to give a full reaction to this, listen to it with you. If you liked this style, let me know, and I can do more of them and save some of the clips that I end up watching anyways to watch with you all. Definitely subscribe and give this video a like. That way I know that you want to see more like it. I have some other videos that I want to do on this situation. There's a lot to talk about and not enough time in the day to talk about it. So stay tuned for more, and let me know, what do you guys think about Kevin's involvement and everything? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you soon for another video.